Genesis 2:5 uses Hebrew words to mention one location in or near northern Mesopotamia during the Copper Age. At that specific time and specific location, there were no plants. 2:5 uses Hebrew words to mention a drought that was one of the causes. Although local irrigation farming during that drought would have been feasible due to the local unconfined aquifer mentioned in Genesis 2:6, Pre-Adamites closest to that location had not been irrigation farming at that specific location during that drought. The closest human farmers, pre-Adamite farmers, might have been over 10 miles away. And irrigation farming in ancient Mesopotamia is no secret to scientists. Irrigation farming would have been feasible even during that drought, but there were no pre-Adamites at that location at that time. Genesis 2:5 mentions their absence. Atheists scoff at Genesis 2:5 through 22, claiming that it contradicts Genesis chapter 1. However, the unclean spirits that influence that scoffing are horrified of Genesis 2:5 through 22. Those demons understand the scripture. Genesis 2:5 through 22 not only destroys young earth creation, but Genesis 2:5 through 22 also contributes to proving that scripture mentions pre-Adamites. What those demons understand about Genesis 2:5 through 22 is that it has tiny Copper Age contexts of Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 2:5 through 22 is not a retelling of the entirety of Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 2:5 through 22 actually mentions a few Copper Age contexts of Genesis chapter 1. And in doing so, Genesis 2:5 through 22 not only destroys young earth creation, but Genesis 2:5 through 22 also contributes to proving that Scripture mentions pre-Adamites. And now you can see why horrified demons lead atheists to scoff at Genesis 2:5 through 22, as if Genesis 2:5 through 22 actually contradicts Genesis chapter 1. One of the absolutely crucial facts here is that Genesis 2:1 mentions the completed universe. You either believe in Genesis 2:1 or you do not. There is no in between. There are no excuses. There is no way around this. Do not try to find a way out. If you do, you will have been overwhelmed with specialized demons before you will have opened your mouth. And here we are. This is your chance to believe in Scripture. In Genesis 2:7, God created Adam, a sixth-day creation, before God created Eden's birds, fifth-day creations in Genesis 2:19. And no Hebrew pluperfect grammar in Genesis 2:19. A sixth-day creation created some fifth-day creations. That is one instance of creation days overlapping each other. Young earth creation just got decapitated within a matter of seconds of having been placed through the fire of Scripture. Jesus, the Messiah, has won. And look at Eden's plants, mentioned at the start of Genesis 2:8. No Hebrew pluperfect grammar. And Eden's trees, mentioned at the start of Genesis 2:9. No Hebrew pluperfect grammar. God created all of those third-day creations after he had created Adam, a sixth-day creation. A sixth-day creation created some third-day creations. Creation days overlap. Creation days are not calendar days. Young earth creation is from the devil. Jesus, the Messiah, has defeated the devil and young earth creation. Genesis 2:5 through 22 is not a retelling of the entirety of Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 2:5 through 22 is exclusively Copper Age creations. If Genesis 2:5 through 22 actually was a retelling of the entirety of Genesis chapter 1, and if biblical creation actually was young earth creation, then Genesis 2:5 through 22 would not prove that creation days overlap. Carefully think about the beginning of the Genesis 2:5 through 22 events. Copper Age events. God had already created countless pre-Adamites, and then came the Genesis 2:5 through 22 events. By not being a retelling of the entirety of Genesis chapter 1, Genesis 2:5 through 22 subtly indicates that pre-Adamites were the chronologically earliest Genesis 1:27 creations. If there were no pre-Adamites, and if Genesis 2:5 through 22 was a retelling of the entirety of Genesis chapter 1 in a young earth creation scenario, then Genesis 2:5 through 22 would have been written in a different order than it is actually written in. God created Adam in Genesis 2:7 after God had created countless pre-Adamites back in previous eras of Genesis 1:27. And remember how Genesis 2:5 subtly alludes to pre-Adamite irrigation farmers having not been in that area at that time. Furthermore, Genesis 4:14 through 17 combines with Genesis 4:25 into scriptural proof that the Bible mentions pre-Adamites. See the description box below.